we faced the challenge in our congregation a number of years ago to discern the missional future of the congregation. And we wanted to do that through what we've learned from the Partnership of Missional Church, through a process of spiritual discernment. And we learned the practice of dwelling in the Word. So we as a leadership thought we will use the practice of dwelling in the Word to see where God focuses the attention of the members of the congregation. So what we did is we trained all the small group leaders in the practice of dwelling in the Word and asked them to do that with their small groups. And we were 3 pastors in the congregation. So the 3 of us decided, well, we will also get groups together, people not in the small groups. And we invited people, 9, 10 people, persons per evening. And then we went through the process of dwelling in the world. And the question was basically, where do you feel is the peace of God flowing? You know, in the last week, what happened? Which contact did you have with which person where you felt the peace of the Lord flowed between you? And I think in total 450 people in the congregation were involved in those discussions. And I think as pastors we did almost 300, and the other 150 was done in. So we worked, and I think we got really good at it as well. So we had this process where people told one another stories of what happened in the last week, where they felt the peace of the Lord flowed. And then with a group, we went through a process and asked them now, categorize the stories. What type of stories? Is there a certain setting in the story that are the same? And we did that tirelessly with all the groups, from the elderly to the young, in various settings. And in the end, categorized that, and we talked to the small group leaders, and with them we categorized it. So it's a simple process of coding where we did not want to impose our categories on the data, but the group had to supply the data, and in the end we made a list and we worked through, and it became clear that the peace of the Lord flows at people's workplaces. That was amazing. It wasn't at homes, it wasn't in private settings, it was at work. Most of the times it was between older and younger people, where the congregants would be the older people, but even the younger members of the congregation would be in discussion or in contact with younger people. Those contacts, both at the workplace and between older and younger people, were not mutually exclusive. So often at the workplace it will be between older and younger people. And one guy told the story of how he became friends with a guy working at the filling station, at the benzene, the petrol station. And he would then often go to the filling station to buy his petrol when he knew that particular young black person were busy, were working there, and then they would have contact, and they just became friends, So some of the contacts were incidental, but repeating in the same pattern. Other were all kinds of cross-cultural, cross-age, cross-generation contacts between people. So I think that the 2 main ones were at the workplace and between older and younger. It was a revelation to people when we affirmed that is the way God is working and God is manifesting God's peace in the world. There was sometimes really where people got tears in their eyes. And I remember the one evening when the one person told about this contact with a young guy at the filling station. He said this young person's passion is to study further. And another person who was there in the same group was from a firm of electrical engineers. And he said, well, we decided today to award a bursary. We feel so blessed as a company that we want to help people to study further. And they then brought the 2 into contact. it so happened, can you believe it, that they helped that person. So it was as if the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of networking and the connection God brings between people through the sharing of the peace just created this cultural shift in the congregation. Another one was often people were asked by others to explain the Christian faith, to witness. They had the opportunity to witness about the meaning of belonging to a congregation, the meaning of to be part of God's family in the world. So that was the third category. And then there were some other smaller ones. Eventually, we took the information to the congregation. So we had a big congregational meeting, which isn't normally part of our tradition, but we did it. We did it in place of an evening service, and we invited the congregation, and we shared it with them. And they then owned it. So the congregation verified it and said that is indeed so. They didn't know it beforehand, but everyone could affirm that is what God is doing through us. So then that became the focus of the congregation. So we said we are not going to have this strong program anymore in the church. We are not going to ask people to bring their energy to the church and to the church's programs. We would rather turn it around, and the congregation would enable and support and train and use the wisdom of people involved in these things to help people to share God's peace in the workplace. For instance, we recognize that it's often younger people asking older people for advice regarding marriages and relationships. So we started to train our members to do exactly that, to have something meaningful to say in terms of the gospel when asked about marriage and about relationships. And that was marriage conflict, from marriage conflict up to just choosing a life partner with wisdom. Is this the right person? And so I think what happened is the dwelling in the world helped us to discover the focus, God's calling for the congregation, and it deeply ingrained the habit of discernment in the congregation. It became a way of discerning. So from then onwards, storytelling was an important part. We paid huge amounts of attention to the stories people had to tell. But in previous years, if you wanted the congregation to do something, as a pastor, you were almost like a salesperson. You had to convince them. So it was so strange to us in the beginning that now there was no convincing to be done. People just realized this is what we want to do and this is what we needed to do. Obviously, a number of them wanted us to have the old types of ministry like house vacation and that stuff. House visitation, we were asked to still do that, which we gladly did. We didn't, stop the old practices and the old habits immediately, but that just through time dissipated, and the central focus of the congregation became helping the members to have a ministry, a meaningful ministry in the world. One last story. I remember one evening, one of the guys, he was a businessman, and his wife told us her story was how she was giving things away. And the husband wasn't satisfied with that. He thought there was something wrong with his wife, because she would rather give something away. He would buy her a nice jacket and she would see somebody, cold and give it away. And I clearly remember that it was a revelation to him that evening when he realized that might actually be God at work. That is how God is sharing peace through his wife. And what happened then is we were involved in a project where a black woman was trained to do nursing care for the elderly in their home. So it became an income for the black woman, but huge investment was needed. And that very husband sold a house that they owned for a number of years. And the house was, his mother lived in the house actually. So he bought it for her, she lived in the house. He improved the house because he was in construction. So over the years he invested a lot in the house, and then he sold the house. But he made an outrageous profit. He was almost ashamed, to think that, what he paid for the house 10 years ago and what he got for the house. So what he did is he brought the profit to the church. And only a few weeks after that discovery, and he then gave the money to the church to give for the training of the elderly woman who would take care of women like his mother, who just recently died. And I can go on and tell story upon story how the entrenchment of spiritual discernment in the life of the congregation renewed the congregation. Let me tell one other story. Some people in the congregation wanted a new organ. Another group wanted an outreach to Turkey, so they needed money. And the third group wanted to build a prayer chapel. And it was for some other reason just 3 strong movements in the congregation, and we did not have the money. So I remember that I thought, no, prayer chapel is not what we need. We've got a huge church building, we've got a wall, we've got plenty of infrastructure. It's not a time to, you can rather go and build something in a township. I was kind of against that. And the organ was important to me, and the outreach was important, the Bible distribution outreach. And then the church council decided they are not going to vote on it. What we must do is we must ask the congregation to pray about it, to help us in the discernment process. And it was my turn to lead the church service, so I personally made the announcement the one Sunday morning that we asked the congregation to pray, and we asked people if they discern, an answer, that they must come and tell us. And there was no time limit on it. We are not sure whether we should do any of the 3 and so on. That was the Sunday. The Wednesday morning my phone rang just after 8. I dropped the kids at school and I was just back. And it was a businessman. He said, can he come and see me? And I said, yes. And he only wanted to come immediately, so which was fine. And then he came and he said, me and my partner were at loggerheads in our business, and we had a very difficult few years, we were pulling against one another, and it was bad for business. And then we started to pray together, and it transformed us and it transformed the business. So when and he's not a member of our congregation, he brought his parents that Sunday morning because they became members and it was their first Sunday. So he came with them just to see that everything is okay and that they are well taken care of and so on. And he sat in the church and he listened to the pastor saying that the congregation is asked to pray about this thing, and that God's will must be discerned. And that was just strange. He said in his congregation people fight and fight and fight, and the last one standing, won the fight, and they get what they want. So this is almost a shock for him. But from his own history with prayer, he realized that prayer is important. And he then said, so what, we discussed this thing, me and my partner, and we want to build the prayer chapel for you. And I said, okay, so what you mean is you build the chapel, we supply the bricks and the stuff, and you build. He said, no, we will give it to you. And I said, do we need to advertise for you? Do you want to make your business known through? He said, no, we would actually prefer to start 5 o'clock in the evening and work through the night and be finished by the next morning. We don't want anyone to know that it is us. And I said, well, yeah, there's only one problem. The congregation is still praying about it. So I was scared, that he would be affronted. And he said, no, obviously I understand that. Maybe they will decide that they do not need, but I'm here to tell you, if they decide there must be a prayer chapel, we will build it for you. So then, you know, I was taken aback because, as I said, I didn't feel that the prayer chapel is by any stretch of the imagination important for us. So eventually the prayer chapel was built, and later on, after leaving the congregation, I was involved in an ecumenical initiative, and we built it in such a way that you simply punched in a code night and day and you can enter the prayer chapel. So I had the most important ecumenical meetings with black bishops and colored pastors, and in that very, very, very prayer chapel that was built, and played a huge role in the continuous renewal of the congregation. So I think that if you become aware of God, and if you focus on God, and if you develop the humbleness that comes automatically with a new terrain, you know, that you do not know the answers, you know, I mean, you just stay open to God, you will be surprised in ways. And sometimes I think I'm telling stories of blessing now. I think sometimes there's a heavy price also to pay. It's not as if everything is okay and it's easy and there's no struggle, and I think God can also lead you along a way of suffering, and maybe have a few experience of that as well. But the whole dynamic of being church changes, and the whole sense of direction and the source of direction changes in amazing ways.